Africa in the Rugby World Cup final that finished 12:32 to 12:32. It was more than that. 12:32. Oh, just check. I've got
12:32.
Yeah, 12:32. That's right. I don't know why.
It just felt like more.
It did feel like more. You're right.
It feel like more.
It'll feel like 12:100 by the time I wake up in the morning going, geez, how bad was that?
And I haven't even started singing yet.
You haven't. You're not going to sing. No.
Yes, I'm going to sing.
God.
I'm going to sing.
All right, go on, get it out of the way.
Waily, waily, well, what happened to our team? They got just pumped. Oh, oh, oh. We weren't victorious. The Boks were so glorious. 4 more years to reign over us. Waily, waily, wail.
Well, we've just lost all our England viewers with that one. You're kind of bit there about the pump thing. This was again, it was in the balance. And,
yeah, it was.
Until
sort of
62 minutes. It was within a score either way, and it really was that Mapimpi try that sealed the deal on 66 minutes. Before that, obviously you were too busy at half time cooking, but at half time I talked about
catering.
That basically, obviously we had the early missed try. Losing Sinclair though after 3 minutes was a massive loss for England. He's been really good carrying this in this one. Knocked out by Itoji's. It looks pretty innocuous actually in slow mo.
I'd like to see that again and actually see it broken down, because at first I thought it was the elbow coming around.
And it was clearly accidental. I mean, you don't elbow or you don't deliberately knock out your player on your own side.
But I will say this: it was created because Itoje tackled with the wrong shoulder. So the player was going this way in front of Itoje, and he tackled with his head on this side and put his arm around the back. Right. So if he'd been here, their heads would have been towards each other, and the chances were ahead. But at least though you can see your fellow player coming, right? And unfortunately, he put his head on the wrong side and caught his own player with the elbow.
Yeah, both sides had tackles on the wrong side.
On the wrong side.
And it's one thing we've seen all this Rugby World Cup.
Bongi Mbonambi as well. He also put his head on the wrong side. That was his concussion.
That was his concussion. We lost Dan Bigger earlier in the when it lost to HIA in an earlier game. Mm-hmm. The tackle technique actually in this Rugby World Cup has left something to be desired actually, but that's a side issue for for another night. But losing Sinclair was a massive thing because then England mistakes really didn't help them here. Now, admittedly, you got to be honest and say a lot of that came about because of pressure. But South Africa got 11 scrums in this game. England's handling really just was not there tonight. That's 11 knock-ons. We've also got Billy Vunipola passing onto the floor, Ben Youngs passing the ball out, Itoje not collecting the ball at a restart, and a few others. I mean, Anthony Watson also had issues as well. England really, their execution tonight wasn't there under pressure, unfortunately, from my point of view. Obviously.
But I think also England were experiencing pressure that they hadn't experienced the whole World Cup.
Yep.
So, yes, of course, the All Blacks put good pressure, but the issue was England weren't getting space created by bossing the advantage line. They were being bossed. So, as a result, the South African defence was always on the front foot.
Yep.
Right. So they were always coming onto them, and they hadn't experienced anything like that kind of physical onslaught that they received. And there was one notable, and probably the most dominant scrum of all, was an English scrum where they won a penalty over the South Africans. But otherwise, besides that one scrum, South Africa absolutely monstered them in the scrum. They stole England line-out ball. They disrupted line-out ball. The England line-out maul got nowhere. In the context, they were smashed mostly. There were a couple of standout players for England. I thought that Underhill was excellent. Underhill who stayed on till the end, right?
No, Curry stayed on.
It was Curry. Sorry, I confused the two. Curry was excellent. There were a couple of players that did well, but overall they were just physically, they lost the the physical confrontation, which they had been winning in every game.
Yeah. Also, a thing about England is, if you look at their record over the last year and a half or 2 years, if they get ahead in the first 10 minutes, they tend to go on and win. If they don't get ahead in the first 10 minutes, they lose.
And South Africa just held them there in that first 15 minutes. They just held them in that 22.
But also, one of the things we talked about last week, I think, was if you won the toss, what would you do? And the answer is, against England, you kick, right? You never receive against England. You don't give them the early territory.
Yeah, you don't want them to run their plays. Yeah, their starting plays.
And that's what. So hence, South Africa kicked off. I mean, I'm assuming South Africa won the toss. By the way, South Africa kicked off, pinned England back, and so it wasn't until about 10 or so minutes England actually got to go. And when they did, Ben Youngs threw the ball out, and it just showed there were the nervousness and the execution just wasn't there from the start. And that's because South Africa started the game perfectly from the start with that, as you say, that pressure, keeping it in the 22. Sure, Pollard missed an early kick, but hey, they got one soon after.
It had a strange fade, actually, that kick. The one that he missed, the first one up, it was curling in, and then suddenly it veered to the right. So, yeah, I don't know if there's something error. He obviously couldn't have hit it perfectly because it did this in the air.
And that was one of two he missed on the evening. The other one was extremely long range.
And I think he overcooked it. Instead of stroking it, he tried to punch it low and hard, instead of just letting his natural stroke take. So that's probably why he did it. But some of the other kicks that he made from the wrong side were not easy kicks, and they were far out, They were 53-meter kicks from the wrong side, and he slotted them comfortably. And that was vitally important. And you don't score 22 points in a World Cup final by accident. You've got to be a special player to score 22 on your own.
He's a class kicker.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But he also attacked the line. But he was also attacking the line. He was also doing some...
but his points came from kicking, and he's a class act at that.
Remember, there's a story here about Andre Pollard, because Andre Pollard won the World Cup under 21. He was captain. He did very well. He played 2 World Cup under 21 finals. He was earmarked to be this kind of player, this kind of special, right? And then he had a series of injuries, and one of those injuries went septic. He got septicemia. It happens like 1 in 20,000 people. Septicemia in his shoulder. He was in hospital for 6 weeks, so lying on his back for 6 weeks, and he missed about 13 or 14 months completely out the game. So he disappeared from South African sort of consciousness. It happens. Like, well, yeah, that player. And so he's walked a long road to come all the way back to be in this particular spot. And I heard him say that what he went through and being in the hospital all that time gave him perspective. And it really struck me how calm he looked. And he looked unfazed.
But one of the other things you can see post-match, the guy he's talking to and chatting with, Delendi, is his 12. That 10-12 combination, knowing he's got a guy that, oh my God, if things are under pressure, I can give it to him, he'll truck it up. I've always got an outlet, and I trust him. And you could see that from the way they were talking and chatting. They're the two guys chatting to each other after the game. He's not chatting with somebody else. And obviously, that shows that the bond those two guys have built up. A couple of chats, and congratulations, obviously, and massive congratulations, we've got to say, to Japan for hosting this Rugby World Cup. Actually, it's been a fantastic Rugby World Cup. They've done. It has been very good.
Let me just say this as well. We were talking about the first 60 minutes and then the last 20, and I think we spoke about this after the Welsh game. That what you just saw there is classic. When I say old school, I don't mean the last 20 years. I'm talking about the last century South African rugby, because the traditional way was subdue and penetrate. Smash them up front for 60 minutes, unleash the backs for the last 20. And South Africa used to have very skillful backs. Even though they were known as being huge forward units, right? They had very skillful backs and very skillful players. People like Carl du Plessis and Michael du Plessis, who were like the Prince of Wings and some of the most skillful midfield players that you'll ever see. Beautiful hands, Dani Gerber, some people rated maybe the best 13 in the history of rugby, silky skills and everything, but the pattern was smash up front and then unleash a really good back line, right? So what you saw, even though it looked close, that slow poison, that python grip was just tightening like this, tightening until they cracked. And they cracked with that try by Mapimpi. Yeah.
But this wasn't a matter of, though, this wasn't a South Africa unleashing their backs attacking wise. So the Mapimpi one was there's a kick up field. Wilson made a great tackle, but England's defensive line didn't have enough players on the blind side, so there was a two-man overlap, and they broke
But early in the match, I think they would have kicked. Early in the match, I think, and again, credit to Erasmus, they didn't kick. They probably, I'd love to see the stats, but they probably kicked a quarter as much with the box kick as they did against Wales.
Faf didn't kick.
Yes,
hardly at all tonight.
Hardly at all. So I think that possibly earlier in the match, in that position, they would have kicked. But at that moment, they went through the hands, and they didn't just go through the hands of their back line on the blind side. But one of those sets of hands was Malcolm Marx.
Yep.
Right. So overall, they attacked at that moment, right? And they also showed what was so important in this game. They showed the importance of wings, right? For all the fact that people talk that rugby is starts in a forward game, and I believe that, it's finished by great wings. And South Africa had 2 killer wings, really out-and-out killers, because that try, although beautiful pass by to Mapimpi put an inch perfect.
But where's that been all tournament? That was
hopefully
great hands.
It was fantastic hands. But the chip kick on attack was inch perfect, and that was Mapimpi's chip kick at full sprint and around and through it. And then, of course, the last try, although he was up against low numbers, you just saw Cheslin Colby, the deadliness of his ability to finish.
Yeah, right? And again, that was from England having to attack at their own half, chasing the game, turn over the ball on the 22, hands to him, up against 3 props and one other player. Once he got past that one, sorry, not 3 props, 2 props and a hooker. Once he got past the first player, it was all over. It looked like there were defenders, but they weren't really there.
They weren't really there. Because
they're the wrong
and that's the thing, maybe that's the difference between this South Africa and previous editions, right? Is that barring Brian Habana and maybe JP Peterson in that 07 team, they haven't had these out-and-out strikers out wide. And you could see the difference that these 2 players made compared to the All Black wings, who were bundled into touch continually. Yep. And there were times that they caught Mapimpi and he went inside and he didn't lose the ball, right? And there were times where you saw the incredible tackling for all of his size by Colby, the chasing of the kickoffs, right? And how many times he put a big forward on the ground, deep inside the English 22.
And any kids who are watching this one, look, if you're smaller than the other guy, get him before he starts running and get around his legs.
Yes. He tackled around the knees, put the 2 knees together, you're going nowhere, right? Yep. He was outstanding. So you saw, and then again, I'm just contrasting. You saw the difference that Ben Smith made when he came last night and he was on the wing.
Yep.
And then his ability to not be bundled out, his ability to read the game, go in, his ability to step and to finish. So, and overall, I mean, I had a sneaking suspicion I had this feeling South Africa would win. I predicted by 9 was my thought. I didn't think it would be 20. But actually, they were going away in the game. They were far the dominant player. But the point that I just wanted to make out that actually they were exerting that last 20 minutes was a result of the incredible physical onslaught that happened for the first 60.
To me, and we're going to disagree on this one. To me, the margin was 12-25. That's really the winning margin. The Colby one was icing on the cake because of scoreboard pressure chasing. England would have kicked. They wouldn't have been playing out of there. That try wouldn't have been available. So to me, it's whilst it was a.
But I'm saying that pressure. That pressure is created by the physical pressure earlier. right?
Yeah,
And you've got somebody who that can kick goals, kick them well, keep you going forward, keep you going forward, keep you going forward, and then that happens, right? And there were some immense collisions in this game, and you saw, and England were not only on the receiving end; they were dishing it out too. I mean, Lut de Jager had his shoulder done by, was it Funapolo or was it Manatu Langi that he didn't get right and
I'm not
popped
sure,
his
but
shoulder.
he popped his shoulder, and he looked in a lot of pain going off.
He was in terrible pain.
Yeah.
Bongi Mbonambi. Bongi Ngem was a playwright and songwriter. Bongi Mbonambi, also huge contact. Excuse me, that's my beer speaking. Huge contact, head on the wrong side. But yeah, you could see the. It just was a different set of problems that they presented to the English pack that they didn't see at any stage up until this point. I mean, absolutely incredible athletes coming at them again and again and again. You know?
Couple of comments in the chat around the referee, both negative and positive, saying he had an outstanding game. I don't think he had a brilliant game today.
I don't think so.
But I don't think he influenced.
I think he was harsh on England quite a few times. There were instances where I thought like Itoje should have got a penalty. There were other instances where I think certain players were offside. And I think overall on the balance, I think he was harsher to, at times England was harshly done by. But it wasn't to the extent that the better team on the day didn't end up winning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not gonna blame it. And
he wasn't
any suggestion that I think someone's put in here that he ruined it for casual fans. No, I don't think he did. But I don't think he had a great game either.
I think he could have taken charge of those scrums. There was a lot of scrum collapses early on. I think I couldn't work out who it was, but somebody was being dominated, and as soon as they were being dominated, it was the old Australian trick of collapsing the scrum. And he could have, from a neutral perspective, taken control, laid down the law, and brought them. I sense that some other stronger refs would have taken hold of that part of the game.
So one of the people we were watching with today is a South African player, a prop or ex-prop, who played at
fairly high level,
at least provincial level in South Africa, at least at age grades. And you asked him at one point, what did England do wrong at that scrum? And he was like, haven't got a clue. That's me. It was so yeah. So there were some that went either way, but even so, I mean, Dan Coles looking at the discipline side of things. England gave up 10 penalties to South Africa's 8. 5 of those 10 penalties were by the props. 4 by Dane Coles, 1 by Mako Vunipola. So yeah, Dane Coles clearly had A, he was on early, and B, he had a torrid time at the scrum, and clearly Garces decided that he was in the wrong. Now, and I think most of the time he probably was, but not all the time.
I mean, the Beast had an immense game. In all facets, the Beast was tremendous, and the England lineout struggled as well. This is a lineout that took on 4 potential jumpers in New Zealand, and ruled the roost against them. Right?
And I think there was an element of here people say getting back up after beating the All Blacks. I don't think anyone has beaten. I think it's in the last 28 years, no one has beaten the All Blacks and then backed up and won the next game at a Rugby World Cup. Was a stat I saw somewhere.
Which is it's credit to the All Blacks for what it requires to beat them.
So there was definitely an element of. One of my concerns coming into this game was that did we have 2.5 years of thinking towards that game and a week thinking towards this game? And to a certain degree, I think that was there around that line-out piece. Borthwick did not have the line-out piece answered, but and England's first 5 minutes, even before the grinding down happened, they were nervous as well. So yeah,
look, it was fairly early on. Sorry to interrupt you, Paul, but I'm just thinking it was within 20 minutes or so that England threw the ball to head high to the front of the line-out and then away.
Yep.
Now normally lineouts start doing that because they're not confident about winning their ball normally
Yep.
off the top, or even at 2, they're not confident anymore.
Yep.
So the quick liner before anybody's formed, quickly throw it into somebody, and they had Itoji like step to the first place, right up on the 5 meter line, throw it straight to him, and then away to the scrum off. Now that's a we must get ourselves some ball type move. So it shows even early on the kind of pressure that they were feeling.
Yeah, it was a strange one. I mean, this one there was plenty of inventive stuff by England because they had Farrell standing at the front of the line out and taking it off the top, or giving it. So it goes over his head, he spins around, collects it, and passes it. So there was some. There was definitely. I'm not saying that England didn't pull out their tricks at the line out, but they definitely didn't. They definitely hadn't done their homework as well on the opposition as that. South Africa, on the other hand. As someone said here, South Africa's only lost one line out all tournament. Yeah,
and that was last week, and they won every one this.
So yeah, they did their homework absolutely. Yeah, 6 from 6 from them.
They had one. You can't count it as a loss. They brought it down and they mauled, and then the ball was trapped and they lost it to for carrying the ball into a maul. But they won that particular line out. So if you think about that, and you think about the whole tournament, and you think about the foundations of rugby have been proven again to be the forwards. In that you've got the team that wins the World Cup over the course of, 4, 5, 6, 7 games, loses one line out on their throw. Right? Puts huge pressure on opposition throws. Right? And in the final against what up until now has been the best scrummaging team. Right? Well, it was between the two.
Yeah.
It was between the Springboks and England, who were the best scrumming. And they monstered the England scrum, barring one example, when the new prop came on, and I think there was a little bit and they monstered. But overall, they absolutely bossed the England scrum that had been really strong the whole tournament. So if you think about this is the team that wins the World Cup, wins all of their lineouts, barring one in the entire tournament, bosses the scrum, provides front football. Yeah, there we go.
Yep. I tweeted at I think it was half time that basically no scrum, no win, and that's where 6 of the points in the first half came from. With two. Well, in the first half it was 2 scrum penalties and two Believe in a Polar holding on penalties were what gave the lead, and we came back. First thing that happens after half time, scrum penalty. Then England got a scrum penalty, but after them all for the line-out. But up until then, you got 3 scrum penalties. That's 9 points, and that's the difference between the two sides. This was definitely down to the tight 5 winning this game, and that's with them even bringing on Mostert early, who is the lightest of those locks,
but the hardest worker.
Yeah, right. And as we said, look, he's got to do 60 minutes. He'll last the 60 minutes.
He'll last the 60.
Whereas Steinman, will he?
He's not as, he doesn't have the same engine.
No.
Very few people, let's be honest, few people do have the same engine as Franco Mostert, and he was really good, let me tell you. He tackled, I'd love to see his tackle count, but he trucked the ball up into the traffic quite a few times. He was a real asset. By the way, before, are we going to talk about standout players?
Yeah, go for it.
I think a player, he's been nominated for World Rugby Player of the Year, and I think the player who actually should win it is Pieter-Steph du Toit, right? For all the fact that Colby is amazing, and I love his play, Pieter-Steph du Toit...
And makes much better highlight reels.
Absolutely. Pieter-Steph du Toit has played, I think, I stand corrected, every minute of every game that he started this year.
Right, okay, yep.
And he plays blindside flank. He's 2 meters tall. He played, and to give you an idea of this man's engine, he played the game against Australia at altitude in South Africa in the championship. That was on a Saturday, South African time, Sunday, New Zealand time. He then got on the plane, and he was one of 3 of the players in that match day, starting 15, that played 6 days later in New Zealand after all of that jet lag. He lasted the entire game, and he was the one right at the death who put the pressure on Aaron Smith, chasing a kick, right? Remember, so after all of that, he's the one chasing a kick, putting pressure on Aaron Smith, who caused him to not look this way, and see Colby snatch it out of the air, right? So from the perspective of an engineer contribution, he hits so many rucks, he makes so many tackles, he's there, he's constantly harrying, he reminds me, he's much bigger, but he reminds me in that way about Skulkberger, just the tireless, continual physical impact that he has on the game.
And because Rassie's been using this two scrum strategy of 6-2 split on the bench, Peter Seftotoy and Vermeulen are the only two players who play the full 80. The other six all get subbed. I mean, Khaleesi hasn't started and finished a game this season, this tournament.
Yeah.
He's replaced every single time by Francois Lowe. So he is one of those two.
And Vermeulen's been replaced a couple of times by, when Khaleesi was out.
Yep.
And they had Quacker Smith playing open side. What I'm saying is this is the one player in the forwards that has played every minute of every game, as far as I can remember this season, and it's the kind of unfashionable work that's done, right? Whereas Colby's work is just very obvious in its impact.
Yep, no, absolutely, definitely. Other players that played well. Now, a player that, we'll be honest, we're not sure whether he played badly or not. We think he played badly, I think he played badly, which was LaRue. But I'm just wondering, was he the guy making all the left-footed kicks in first receiver, or was Pollard kicking with both feet? I'm not so sure. So that's one of the things I'm a little bit concerned about.
We've got a problem here, people, right? It's got to do with where we were watching. And I don't mean the TV over there, that it's a nice big TV. I'm talking about being in New Zealand. And being in New Zealand, we were getting Scotty Sumo Stevenson's commentary, right?
Yes.
And so whenever those left-footed kicks were being taken, the camera was panned back on the wide angle, and the kicker was, sort of this kind of size, right? And he was kicking, and Sumo was saying, Pollard kicks. And we, by this stage, at the end of the tournament, having watched the commentary by Scotty Stevenson, we have no confidence that he was calling the right name.
Yes, that's a problem.
Right?
We do. There have been a number of times where he's gone, such and such. Oh, it's easy to mix them up. No, one of them wears a scrum cap, the other one doesn't. It's not easy to mix them up. But anyway, so it's been So maybe LaRue was having a better game than we thought, but I thought he was perhaps the only South African player that had a poor game today. I think everyone else had a decent game.
I actually think he was way better than he was previously, and he had an impact taking the ball up from the back, right? But I also think that they cycled Andre Pollard to the back a lot, right? And I'd love to interview Rassie Erasmus and talk about what his tactics were in that game, because you saw Pollard covering at the back much more than previously, right? So where was Willie LaRue at that time?
You say Willie LaRue took it up. He carried for 9 meters in this game, 7 times. He really did not do.
No, but I saw him make that break that put somebody away. That one break must have been more than 9 meters.
That's what the stats say.
Well, the stats here show, I saw that territory was dominated by England.
Yes.
Right? The one on the TV said that territory was dominated by South Africa.
So a quick check, come back to this one. Okay, so we're not sure whether we trust ESPN stats here. Okay, so maybe ESPN stats are a bit dodgy.
I think they are, because what was pointed out in the official stats that they were showing there was that England had more possession but less territory, right?
So some interesting stats there. So okay, well we probably can't do too much from that then.
Who stood out for you for England?
Most of the players who stood out for me, I guess, was from a negative point of view, like getting held on, getting caught holding on. Ben Young's doing what we've seen him do so many times before, which is have really good games and then a poor game. I don't think he was
But he was under a lot of pressure.
He was under a lot of pressure, true.
Yeah, he was under a lot of pressure. His forwards weren't doing him much favours.
Coles clearly had a shocker at scrum time with those 4 penalties, and I think that took a lot of his energy, which meant he couldn't do much else around the pitch. And we didn't see Mako carry that much from memory. So again, I think those two guys, or the props, put so much energy in at the scrum time that they didn't have it to do around the loose like they would normally have done.
I thought Tuolungi battled valiantly.
Yep.
He was the one player that seemed to have the ability to make impact physically on the South African defence. Vunapolo, sometimes that's Billy, right? Also sometimes had it, but again, there was this air that they expected to be able to penetrate,
Yep.
right? And they seemed to be very slow to catch on the fact that they were actually being dominated. It was almost like, no, that happened last time, it won't happen again, right? And instead of aiming for...
And this is one of the things that we talked about with New Zealand. New Zealand didn't change their style of play when they needed to. England here didn't start kicking as early as they should have done.
Yeah.
And just said, right, okay, we've got Elliot Daly who has got a boot on him.
Yeah.
Now, he had one real shocker, but on the whole, he's got a good long-range boot on him. Farrell's got a decent boot on him. You're forward. You've got plenty of kicking options.
Yeah.
Right. We're just going to play kick. We're just going to play pushback with you because we reckon we can kick as far as you can. Here we go, folks.
Yeah.
Because England weren't, and you can see this from the 173 metres for England off 122 runs. South Africa 138 metres. So that's what, twice as many metres from 89 runs from 30 less runs. That's just so
far more dominant.
England were just not getting over that game line, and that was the killer for them on this one. It didn't help that those 11 knock-ons that they didn't actually they weren't stringing phases together either. I think there's only probably about 2 times I can think of them where they actually got past about 5 phases.
They were not that patient.
No,
right? They had that one phase, that massive 20 or 30 phase
in the 22
inside the 22, which ended up with them not scoring a try, but they kicked a penalty, and it almost like it sapped their confidence
on 34 minutes.
Yeah, and it in that first half, and it was like from then on they even before that though, to be fair, they were harried and rushed, and they didn't have the confidence to just keep the ball. We'll work it out. Be patient, right?
And I mean, a lot of could be again props to South Africa because England managed to get Daly into space off first phase against New Zealand. They kept trying to get the ball into Daly, into May. Not so much Anthony Watson, to be fair, but into those guys to make the breaks. But all the time they were covered, and they didn't get to score. One of the things we talked about South Africa doing previous to this game, I don't think they did so much this game, was how narrow the defence was, and then expecting the winger to catch up outside. They weren't defending as narrow.
They weren't as narrow.
They were definitely not as narrow this weekend because and they know Daly and May have got pace. You're not going to catch them, so you've got to be out there with them. And tonight they defended wider, which again shows good coaching, adapting to the opposition, which is all those things that I don't think England did tonight.
I thought Itoje tried hard.
Yep. He got through tonight. I think it was like 16 tackles or something.
Yeah, he tried hard. He had an impact. But there was just this sense to me of times like they almost like they couldn't quite believe what was happening to them, right? They couldn't quite believe the extent of the physical impact that these players were having on them.
And I think it's a tale of just about most rugby teams at this Rugby World Cup or nowadays, where the coach sends them out with, "This is how we're playing," and they're just not, and they don't adapt. They can't. Either the structures are too complex, you can't adapt it on the fly, or the players aren't either noticing or being able to make that decision out there on the fly. Because South Africa didn't have to adapt; they played their style, right? Whatever they said,
but the thing is, they hit on a slightly different plan, and it worked from the beginning.
Yes, exactly. I'm saying I'm not saying they played the same plan against the Wales. It was slightly different.
Yeah,
but it worked from the beginning,
and they just rolled it up.
You see other teams, New Zealand had a style against England, rolled it out at the beginning. It didn't work, and they couldn't change. England started something against New Zealand, rolled it out at the beginning. It was working, went with it. Yeah. I think that's probably where modern rugby is that if your style doesn't work, you can't adapt.
Yeah,
is where we're going.
Well, once upon a time, rugby was dictated by the fly half, by the first 5. What's happened, especially since the law changes in 2008, was really where it came into how they were policing the breakdown, right? and how they were requiring the tackler, it was 08, that the tackler must release, right? The tackler must release, get to his feet, come from an onside position, change the whole game. From that moment on, rugby started being played via the scrum off, right? And he was dictating play. And we kind of reaching the stage where we're not having a fly halves anymore like Dan Carter, who started, of course, playing before that change, developed his rugby, where they dictate to their pack and their scrum off what they want, right?
It's interesting you say that because I mean, it's Aaron Smith, and I've not heard other. I would use another example if I had one, but Aaron Smith talked about the difference between Mo'unga and Bowden Barrett.
Mm-hmm.
Bowden Barrett tells him what he wants. End of story. And it's Bowden Barrett's show.
Yes.
When Richard Mo'unga's there, he doesn't tell so much. He asks much more of the players around him as to what they want, and then the message gets to Aaron Smith. So it's much more. He's got a much more collegiate style, whereas Bowden Barrett, it's my show. Now, it's not in a, I'm not trying to say in an arrogance way, but
that's what Carter did.
That's what Carter did.
If you see old clips of Carter playing, you'll see, and you instead of watching where the ball is, you watch him. You'll see there's a constant stream of instructions going to the scrum half and to the forwards, and he would not take a ball, right, if it was rubbish. So don't pass pressure down the back line. He'd say, sort it out. Keep it, until he felt that they had front foot ball and he could hit the line, taking it, and then, well, of course, difference on defense if he needed to clear.
Yep.
I'm talking about in the parts of the field where he would say, sort that out, work it, and then he'd say, now, and then he'd get the ball. And it seems almost like because so much playing off 9 has come into the game, that some of the fly halves just don't have that taking charge of the game. And it's when you have fly halves that take charge of the game that you can more easily change the pattern.
And that's because, look, the scrum half is spending his time running to the next
running.
He can't look around and see what's going on, which is what your fly half, your 12, those guys can do. And they should be doing.
And you know what, really, this sounds strange because they were being monstered physically, but what England really needed to do was to pick and go and pick and go and pick and go and pick and go for a period, and hold the ball and hold the ball and hold the ball, right? And then look for gaps when they had mismatches. But they just didn't have that patience. They'd attack out wide, tack out wide. They expect Tuolangi to burst through. They wouldn't get it, and then they'd kick the ball away.
Yeah, it was just that one time in that 22 in the first half, that when they did that a bit, you saw players picking and going, and they were actually making. I mean, England managed to go from the 22 up to the Bock try line, and then they went all the way back again. It's over the period of 20 phases.
But you were crying out once they got to the try line. You were crying out, spin it.
Yeah,
it's on wide. And they're stuck to. But again, there's the thing. They stuck against maybe any other team in this World Cup that close to the try line. Those England forwards would have taken it over the line.
Yep.
But they weren't getting it over against these forwards on this day, and they stuck with it, right? Hindsight is very 2020, but it's certainly. It appeared that the England players were surprised by how big, how strong, how good the players they were up against today were, right? And it's almost like their minds couldn't quite wrap around what they were facing.
And players like Itoje, the two Vinopolas, George, Cruz when he came on, all play for Saracens, and that doesn't happen to them at club level, and it very, very rarely happens to them at country level. So that's what it is. I think we've probably covered everything we were going to say. So congratulations to the Springboks. I guess the only thing we haven't actually mentioned here is something you've been talking about up until the run-up to this, as to what the impact of Khaleesi lifting that cup is going to be across Africa.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I've posted on Facebook, and maybe you can put links in on this discussion channel for people to have a look at, to just get an idea of how important this has been to South Africa, how it has united South Africans across all socio-economic, political, cultural, and racial lines, how inspirational some of the stories are behind these Springboks, we mentioned very briefly Andre Pollard's injury journey, but also, Sia Kolisi. I mean, Sia Kolisi watched the 07 win in a tavern in a township because his family didn't have a TV. Sia Kolisi got a scholarship to go to high school at a it's not a what you would call a private school, it's a government school, but it's a prestigious school in Port Elizabeth and known for very good rugby. And when he got to it, it's got a boarding establishment there, a hostel. And when he got to the hostel and he was, 12 or 13, maybe 13, probably 13. And they took him to his room and there were 2 beds in the room. And he said, whose beds are these? And they said, well, one is yours and one is your roommate. And it's the first time in his life that he'd had a bed. For the first 13 years of his life, he'd slept on pillows on the floor. And the other thing and he said that wasn't the best thing of all. He said he used to borrow boots to play and borrow shorts to do trials, whatever. But he'd never owned, in 13 years, a pair of socks. And he went to the cupboard and he opened the door in this new bedroom, and there was a box full of socks. And that was the highlight for him. And that is 13. And now it's, 14 years later. He's about 27 or 28, maybe it's 15 years later. And he's lifting that cup. You're talking about a kid who at 13 had never had a bed and never had a pair of socks.
Now, that's a great story for him. But more importantly, there are now X million or million or
millions and
millions of kids across Africa who are in that they're in that situation who can see what can possibly
happen. Exactly.
They now have a route out. They now have a route. Yeah, they now have a route, an aspiration. They can do that. So
and it's not just South Africa, by the way. It's across Africa. There's I don't know how many million small black kids, little guys, looking at what he's done, looking at him. And by the way, we'll have a word about Rassie and that trophy ceremony. But to see this black guy, right, lift that trophy, what it means, because they look and they say, he's like me. I could do that.
Yep.
I can play this game. I could work my way out by working hard. So the impact and the love, the effect for rugby generationally over the next 40 years on that continent is immense. And I want to give huge kudos to Rassie Erasmus. Not only has he been a great coach, not only has he pulled these, it's 2 years ago, it's 57-0 here in Albany in New Zealand. They got pumped by the All Blacks. But when the culmination came of his success, and Sia Kolisi was looking for him.
No, Sia Kolisi found him, had a chat with him. I want you to come forward, lift the cup with me.
Yeah.
And Rassie
he
was
refused.
like, nah.
He refused. He not only refused, he went and stood in the back behind all the players.
Which also is where most coaches normally are. But
yes. This is a World Cup trophy ceremony, and so many people, and I'm not saying all coaches, but so many people would go, oh yeah, I want to be part of that. But he took himself.
By the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't think Faf is backward about coming forward, right? He went to the back, and so it was man alone that Kolisi lifted it, right? Not with some white guy who coached him who lifted it, right? Yeah. And I think Rassie Erasmus not only knew the importance of showing that the players did it, but he knew the symbolism of that picture.
Yeah.
Right? It's now 24 years since South Africa first won it, since Francois Pienaar lifted it, and Nelson Mandela was next to him, and now you've got a black captain lifting it, right? And I think it bodes really well. I just hope that as Rassie steps back from being the coach to being director of rugby again, that they bring in an innovative coach and they now go forward from this conservative game plan, which is what they needed to, coming from where they were, and now they progress, because long term, if they want to take this team now, which is currently the hottest property in rugby, having won the World Cup, you've got a window, and they want to take this team, and they've got generational players like 07, right, where you had Victor Matfield, Bakkies Botha, Schalk Burger, players like that, right? They now have generational players as well. All those locks, front rows, Beast is right at the end, but there's a little bit of rubbing off of the gold that can happen there. Bongi and Bonambi, Malcolm Marks. You've got two outstanding wings. You've got Spoo and Causey as well. When you look at the generational players that they can take this and progress the style of play, because you would need to have more arrows in your quiver if you're going to have a successful run at the All Blacks game after game, right? Because they remain, let's be fair, they remain the gold standard for success. Mm-hmm. So if you want a winning margin, a winning rate against them, and remember South Africa will play them twice every year.
Yep.
Over the next 4 years, you need more. But they've got the tools there. They've got the raw material.
Cool. So there you go, folks. I think we've covered up everything that we have. Thank you very much, John, for hosting me during all these Rugby World Cup
it's been
games.
A pleasure.
And coming on all the shows. I'm sure I'll keep John. I've still got to do a Hash Rugby chat with him where we actually discuss the global calendar. So don't worry, he's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay.
Congratulations to South Africa. Congratulations to Springboks.
This is I'm singing you out.
Sing me out.
The
now.
last one.
This is and this is now. I've no idea. Oh, this is the.
And the only one I sing to the right words is the final winner. Bondolwayo.
He got lucky, didn't he? It's his team that's. Cheers, guys. Thank you all. I'll be back hopefully Tuesday night, but I've got no internet at home with the Hash Rugby chat, and Wednesday night with the All Black session. So do join us for those. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, all that kind of stuff, and become a supporter of DrivingMaul. Patreon.com/DrivingMaul. Thank you, everybody. Good night.